What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shaped their professional trajectory in life. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. We continue Technology Month with the President of ViON Corporation, Jeff Henry. The Ohio State graduate not only talks about how baseball shaped his leadership journey, but also continues the rivalry banter with last week's podcast guest, Rob Davies, who went to Michigan. Jeff brings more than 30 years of sales expertise to his role at ViON, and I'm excited to discover the lessons Jeff learned as a three-sport athlete in high school and a member of that baseball team at Ohio State.
Every day, you're playing one-on-one with yourself. Do you want to get up and you want to take a day off, or do you want to get up and you want to compete effectively? But ultimately, it's played out in your mind. So I try and teach that to the younger folks, that you're going to make the decision whether you're going to win or lose, and you're going to make it when you wake up in the morning. And I try to get them to understand my expectation is you're going to wake up with a winning attitude because we have a winning culture, and it'll play itself out, but you've got to do your part. I hold everybody accountable for that. They're responsible for their outcome.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Don, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this morning.
Yeah, well, I know we're going to talk a little bit about baseball before we get too far, but I read in an industry blog that ran in 2018 that said that you love the game of basketball and actually still play some today. Is that true?
I do. You know, at 59 years old, I still play in competitive events with some of my friends back from Akron, Ohio, and we pick up some guys from other cities, but we play in the Senior Olympics Tour, even though that's a hard phrase to say. But yeah, we play in tournaments probably 3 or 4 times a year, and I still try to play 3 or 4 times a week if I can at open gyms.
Awesome. I love the game too. I actually have a full court at my house. So I got to ask, if I'm guarding you, what am I looking out for?
Well, first of all, you're going to guard me, force me to my left. Probably not an uncommon thing for somebody my age. But if I am right-handed, force me to my left. And the other thing I've always taken great pride in when I play basketball, it's not always the scoring, even though I have a pretty decent jump shot, but I like to play good defense. So I won't give you too much room in between us so that you can take a shot like Michael Jordan did.
There you go. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'll make sure to file that away the next time I'm in your neighborhood.
Well, so now are you playing pickup basketball?
I do. In fact, I still play regularly. And in fact, one of the things, Coach K at Duke does a camp for guys, an old man basketball camp, brings 100 guys into Durham. You play on Cameron Indoor Stadium.
Wow.
Brings back all of his old players. So your coaches are Grant Hill and Wojciechowski.
Yeah.
My wife gave it to me for my 50th birthday as a gift, and I've gone every year since. Last year I was intending to go, and 2 weeks before we were to go, I was out playing, and a kid went to go by me, and I reached instead of moved, and he took my arm with him. My fingers got caught in his jersey.
Oh, no.
So I had to go have it surgically repaired. I'm back. I got cleared to play again a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's at the end of May. It's a contribution to his charity, but it's 5 days of hoops.
Yeah, we played like in the Tampa Bay Masters, and we played in January, and I'm telling you, there's some really good talent out there.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Jeff, you know, in a world today where we're telling kids to specialize in one sport all year round, I had a chance to go through your high school yearbook online, and it looked at times as if you were in more team pictures than you were not, because it seemed like you were on everything. You certainly participated in 3 sports. What do you think the advantage was for you being on so many different teams
with so many different teammates in so many different sporting environments?
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, for me, you probably saw none of them were individual sports. So from a concept perspective, I've always liked playing on teams. I like being around people, and my experience in high school was outstanding. We had really solid coaches. My baseball coach, I think, was the winningest coach in all of Ohio baseball for a number of years, and he still might be the number one as far as not winning percentage, but winning the total amount of games. His name was Tim Engelke, but I always played for great coaches. I liked being around people. I always liked the discipline of playing on a team, and I always liked the competitiveness of it, whether it was practice or whether it was in games. I always liked to be competitive, and it kind of translated itself into the business world for me.
When you say that you like the competitiveness of being part of a team, what was it that you think you brought most to these teams? Was it a higher level of game and you were pushing others? Was it a willingness to do what others wouldn't? What was it that you thought you brought most to the teams you played on?
Well, I think, when I reflect back on it, I was a very average athlete. I was relatively tall, relatively thin, but I brought a certain amount of hustle and attitude to whatever sport I was playing. So I knew I wasn't the best person out on the field, and I had to figure out ways to make myself extremely competitive. And most of the time it was through hustle, whether it was running laps or whether it was running sprints or whatever it was. I always tried to finish first. And as a result of that, I always tried to push everybody else on the team to try and catch me. So I think a lot of that had to do with just the fact that I knew I was average. And if I wanted to be above average, I had to put in extra time. I had to think about the game strategically. I wasn't going to do it on the natural athleticism that I had. So I strategically had to know the games, know some of the drills or I'll call them shortcuts, ways to make myself extremely competitive with people that were really good. So I did that in all three sports that I played in high school.
Yeah. Again, a little off task here, but when you mentioned going to shortcuts for things that could help you as you're doing that, what would be, for example, if you could think of like a shortcut, something that you would work on that might create for you a competitive advantage?
Well, and again, my reference is going to be basketball. If I set a pick for somebody, I would roll to the basket. Just little things like that. I would set blind picks for people that I knew then they could cut to the basket when they weren't expecting it. So it was the little nuances of the game, simple things that I would do that I thought freed up the team to be more successful. Sometimes it was little things too. We had a coach in basketball that made us do the Mikan drill, which I don't think it's extremely popular now. I know as my son went through high school and played basketball.
You've never heard of Mikan, probably, George, right?
That's right. That's right. But you do the Mikan drill, right? And we had to start every practice doing 50 to the right and 50 to the left. And it played itself out because our teams were known for being able to go to the left side of the basket or the right side of the basket. And there was a big competitive advantage to that. And so just little things like that always played themselves out in games and always seemed to make a difference.
Yeah. Now, I know in baseball, you were both a starting pitcher and a relief pitcher.
Right.
You actually played both roles on your team. And there's certainly a difference between the mindset that you have to bring into a competitive environment, depending on which one of those two roles. I wrote a book with a guy named John Smoltz, right?
Yeah.
Who actually made the Hall of Fame, but he started in professional baseball successfully and actually was a reliever. And a big part of that book was how he shifted from that mindset. But you were doing it right in the middle of a season because you were playing both roles on a team. Can you share a little bit, maybe with those who might be listening, about how you shifted mindsets between two very different roles?
Yeah, I guess, if I reflect back on it, I would look at a starting pitcher. You would know you were going to play in the game maybe 4 days, maybe a week before the event and before the game itself. And so it was more strategic. You could think through the lineup of the opposing team if you knew them. You could think through the game a little bit more. What did you want to accomplish in the first couple of innings? What did you want to accomplish in the next two innings? How many pitches were you looking to throw? Because we always worked off of pitch counts. And so it's more of a strategic nature. When you went in as a reliever, you get about 10 to 15 minutes to warm up. It's more tactical in nature. The reason the coach is putting you in there is for something that he believes that you can put into the game at this point in time that's going to be a competitive advantage. For me, unlike John Smoltz, I didn't have a 95 to 100 mile an hour fastball. So I had to throw a lot of off-speed pitches. And so tactically, when I would go into a game, I knew it was because there was a hitter coming up that loved fastballs, and I wasn't going to throw him a fastball. So I always thought it was more tactical when I went in as a reliever, and it was more strategic when I went in as a starter. I just thought it was two different aspects of the game. And then tactically, you don't know if you're going to go in there for a couple of batters. You don't know if you're going to go in there for a half an inning. You don't know if you're going to pitch 2 innings. It's just a little different mindset, more in the moment versus the opportunity as a starter to think through the lineup and think through what you want to accomplish through a 7 to 9 inning game.
Yeah. Then you go down the road 80 miles to the Ohio State University.
Right.
And you walked onto the baseball team.
Correct.
Being a walk-on is hard. You don't get the scholarship money. You're not guaranteed playing time, but you got to go through all the drills and do everything. In fact, you might even need to do them better than some of the other people. Tell me what you learned through that journey.
First of all, when you walk on, I'm going to call it a Division I baseball program. You walk out with 100 of your closest friends, and you know from the onset they're going to take maybe 4 to 5 of you. So you got to figure out ways to differentiate yourself out of the gate. As a pitcher, too, you're not sure when you're going to get an opportunity to get into one of the scrimmage games to really make an impression. So I talked about my high school experience. I mean, I had to differentiate myself. And, I found myself trying to make the team by, first of all, I wanted to make sure the coaches knew who I was and what my name was. And I did that through the little things like we talked about, the little hustle things. Again, if you were warming up and you were running laps, I always made sure that I was in the front of the group versus the back of the group. If you were running sprints, I always tried to make sure, again, I was finishing first versus second. If they needed somebody to go catch another pitcher while he warmed up, I volunteered to catch. If it was hitting fungos to the infielders, I volunteered to hit fungos. If it was shagging balls, I volunteered. So the first thing I want to show them is, first of all, that I cared deeply about the opportunity. I wanted to make sure they understood my name, and I also wanted them to understand that I was a good overall team player versus an individual player. I think it differentiated me. And then when I did get into the scrimmages, I did relatively well. And so I had the opportunity to play for 2 years at Ohio State, kind of based on that reputation.
That's awesome. And I got to tell you, I can't wait till they get to the second half of this question, because every one of those I can see and imagine play into the journey you've taken in life as a business person.
Yeah.
So in your athletic career, were you influenced by someone, a coach or a parent, that you still think about all these years later?
Yeah, I certainly was. I had mentioned his name earlier, but it was Tim Engelke, who was my high school baseball coach. And I think he won 760 games, and I'm not sure if he coached 35 to 40 years, but it was a long period of time. It was one of those pride things. So Coach Engelke always had a winning tradition. He had a winning culture. He was known as a very disciplined coach. He didn't cut you too many breaks. He treated almost everybody equally. If you made the team, that was part of a franchise or part of a history of a team that was always going to be successful in Ohio baseball. And so he had the greatest influence on me as an athlete. First of all, it was discipline. He had a very humble nature about him. He taught us the things, whether we just won a big game, don't get too high. And if we just lost a game, don't get too low. You got to stay even keeled. He was the guy that in baseball practices can be rather dry. We worked on the fundamentals as pitchers, little things. It was fielding a bunt down the third baseline, throwing to first base. We would do that for 15 minutes. And then it was down first baseline. We do that for 15 minutes. Then it was back at you for 15 minutes. And then it was the throw to second base. And he just taught you the little things that I think most of the time you would start out and you would go through the drill and say, I'm going to take this drill off because it doesn't seem that important, and the odds of me getting a bunt back to the mound are slim to none. So I think I'll take this play off. He didn't let you do that. And ultimately, those little disciplines came back in a big way for me personally. And there was a big moment in a regional baseball tournament game where I was in relief, and it was the last inning, and I had to field that ball and throw it to second base because we were only up by 1 run. And that's a relatively dangerous throw, because if I throw it into center field, then they've got a guy at first and they've got a guy at third with no outs. And I was able to implement that throw and barely get the runner out, but it was really important. We ultimately won the game. But Coach Engelke never let you take a play off. And ultimately, there were some really great teammates. And that was my junior year. And when we had seniors, we expected to win, because Coach Engelke, he not only expected to win, but he wanted to make sure you deserved to win. And he always said that to us. So you should expect to win because you deserve to win, because you practice harder and you care more and you do the little things. And so he was just, again, if I had to reflect back on a single person, it was Coach Engelke.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, Coach Engelke is still alive.
Do you get a chance to interact with him ever?
I don't as much as I would like to. So I haven't seen him in a few years, but I owe him a phone call, and ultimately I've never been able to sit down and talk to him about what I just said to you. And I want to make sure I do that relatively soon.
Well, if nothing else comes from today, I hope that that will be part of it, because I know that from every coach you ever spend time with, they tell you those are the greatest. Those are the conversations that give them another day's breath. So
Right.
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So transitioning to the second half of this conversation, this is where we're going to talk about how some of those lessons, some of those very fundamental things you talked about would play ultimately into your leadership. And now the opportunity you get to lead those 200 people there at ViON and all the amazing things you guys are working to achieve. I read an industry blog that said if you could pick a job you'd love to be doing today, you'd actually rather be a basketball coach. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You're sitting there in the palatial office, but you'd rather be sitting in some sweaty gym.
Yeah, I think so. And I find myself in my free time sitting in sweaty gyms watching kids play. So yeah, it's definitely a passion of mine.
And what about being a basketball coach turns you on?
I think first of all, it's a great way to stay young, and I always enjoy being around kids. When I say basketball coach, it would have been at the high school level or at the college level, but I like forming teams. I like to see teams improve. Again, I'm a goal-oriented person, and I like to step people through the process, and I do it sometimes in the business world as well. But it's like I talked about earlier, if you do the little things in practice, you prepare yourself for the game. If you strategically practice strategic situations that you'll face in a game, you'll execute well in a game and have a winning record. But again, it's the steps that prepare you for the moment when you do play the game and play the tournaments. And so I always liked basketball because I always understood it well. And I always understood that it was going to be the little things that you would do that were going to create the great results for you. And so I think that's why I've always had that passion, again, for baseball as well, but certainly for basketball. And it's played itself out into the business world for me.
Yeah. So now translating into your role as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
how are you teaching your team the fundamentals? How are you relaying some of what we're talking about right here into the broader context of the team at ViON?
It plays itself out in a multitude of ways, and it's situational at times too. And sometimes you got to understand when to motivate a team, with discipline. Sometimes you need to understand when to reward a team, but it plays itself out each and every day. And for me, it's just with this group of people that we have at ViON today, and then I had at Hitachi Data Systems prior to this opportunity that I have. It's teaching them what I talked about with Coach Engelke. And there was a great book, and I'm sure you've read it, by Rick Pitino. But it's the fact that if you expect to win, you should deserve to win. And again, you've got to do the little things, So we have some young sales reps here, and it's like, I step them through the process. Like I can look at your forecast of the opportunities that you're participating in, and I can do math, and I can tell you what the odds of your winning percentage are going to be. If you want to be great, you've got to have double or triple the amount of opportunities in your forecast. But how do you do that? You got to wake up early in the day with energy. You've got to go out and you've got to make lots of cold calls. You've got to create opportunities out of those cold calls that work their way into proposals. And then you've got to take those proposals and they work their way into your forecast, because now you're competing and you've convinced a customer to do something. But if you don't do the first two steps and you just expect to close 100% of your forecast, it's not going to play itself out. And it's just like taking a day off at practice. Every day you're playing one-on-one with yourself. Do you want to get up and you want to take a day off, or do you want to get up and you want to compete effectively? But ultimately it's played out in your mind. So I try and teach that to the younger folks, that you're going to make the decision whether you're going to win or lose, and you're going to make it when you wake up in the morning. And I try to get them to understand my expectation is you're going to wake up with a winning attitude, because we have a winning culture, and it'll play itself out, but you've got to do your part. I hold everybody accountable for that. They're responsible for their outcome.
You just played through that with a very generic conversation with a younger person. Is there one, obviously without naming names, is there a story you can tell me about how you shepherded or maybe mentored someone using some of those concepts? Maybe someone who grew to become, over the course of your 30-year tenure, quite
Right.
the successful person in the corporate space.
Yeah, I am kind of blessed at this point in my career. now I get to see a lot of the people that were sales reps for me over the period of time. I got to promote a lot of them and make them first line managers. And then they turned into regional vice presidents with various companies. And I see a lot of them leading sales organizations now in the technology space, which I've been in over 35 years now. And so it's really gratifying. It's more gratifying to me than any financial thing I've ever accomplished or any bonus I've ever received. It's more rewarding to me to see that kid that we hired out of college or that young lady that we hired out of college and see them advance their careers to a point now where they're running sales organizations in the technology space and being very successful. And then every once in a while, like we talked about the gratitude, every once in a while, then I get the opportunity to run into them at events, or they'll make a phone call to me, or I like to check up on them. And it's just always a gratifying conversation because you get the opportunity to reflect back and they tell you what they thought was the most important thing that you taught them. So the ability to teach and see people be successful in their careers is more important to me than anything that I've ever accomplished individually.
Yeah. So we're talking there about your opportunity to mentor a few folks. I read in a piece, an interview with you, that a guy named Randy DeMont of Memorex Telex, a great mentor of yours. He played college football at Wittenberg. Is that right?
He did. Yes, he did.
What did you learn from him as a mentor that you now share as a mentor?
I think everything I've said so far in this interview in some shape or form came from Randy DeMont. Randy was a person that was actually a neighbor of ours, and he graduated from Wittenberg University, got a job at IBM, and became a neighbor of ours when I was still in high school. And Randy was an All-American at Wittenberg. He was the captain of their first national championship team. Throughout my life, not only did I get advice from him, but I've had the opportunity to work for him throughout my career. And, he's the person that taught me, like I said, everything I talked about. I mean, he believes that culture is the most important thing. And culture is created by having a great team that's a highly disciplined team. There's no excuses. You're responsible for your outcome. Randy also taught me some little things too, like is it better to have a superstar on your team and a bunch of average players if the superstar is not a good teammate? His belief, and in my belief, we would rather have a bunch of great teammates than have one superstar. And he taught me how to assemble winning teams by creating a winning culture. And again, we talk about accountability. We talk about discipline. We talk about what do you do when nobody is watching? That was one of his great things. So his expectations for me when I was young and I started working for him at Memorex Telex and I was 24, 25 years old, it's like the workday starts at 8. You do yourself a favor if you got there at 6 o'clock and you studied something you didn't know. Or it's always hard to go see CIOs, the most important person in an IT organization that influence the most sales decisions. Call these CIOs because I bet they get there at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he just taught me the little things. What do you do between 6 and 8 in the morning? Because everybody comes to work and works from 8 to 5. And then what do you do from 5 to 7 o'clock at night to differentiate yourself? And what are you doing each and every day to make yourself better? So just the discipline and the fact of what he taught me about creating a winning culture has played itself out. Because for me, I've been at 3 or 4 companies now where I was hired in to run the sales organization, but it was a transformation. It was a turnaround situation. And the first thing I talk about is a winning culture, and I've got to have the right people on the right team, and everybody's got to expect to win because people want to be around winners. And if you're going to turn a company around, the first thing you got to think about is the culture. And in all of that, I learned from Randy. And again, he's an extremely professional guy too. He would look at the little things like wear white shirts and blue suits in the 80s. Are you dressed for the occasion? Do you expect to win? Do you act like a winner? And what are you doing to prepare yourself? So Randy played out every aspect of it. And again, he's a great friend of mine in life or whether it was in business. He's just had a tremendous effect on me.
I love that. And does he still live nearby?
No, he's in Denver, Colorado and spends a lot of time down in Bonita Springs.
Well, sounds like he's found that new phase of life for himself.
He has. And he's enjoying it. He loves his granddaughters.
Good. That's great. As a pitcher, right? We'll go back to baseball. You mentioned you were an off-speed guy, right? So you weren't going to blow anybody by with a 99-mile-an-hour fastball. You were going to try to paint corners or do whatever it took. Try to keep them on their heels. But you have to know your opponent and know what they're capable of in order to know what you should be actually delivering to them. How did that ability to kind of understand your opponent, scout them, how has that played into some of what you do and the way you lead as a professional?
Yeah, I think when I reflect back on it, you can watch a hitter before you face them. So if I was in a relief situation, I would watch hitters and I'd see how they would react to certain pitches. Did they bail out? Did a right-handed hitter lift their right leg? And were they afraid of a pitch? Did it look like they were afraid to get hit by a pitch? Did they drill the fastball that was on the outside corner? And if I never had seen them before and it was the first time I was facing them, I'd throw them a couple of things I didn't think they could hit, but I would always watch their body language to see how they reacted to what I did. And the way I think it plays out in life is I'm a people person and I like to be able to read people and understand whether I think they're accepting of the conversation. If I'm trying to sell them something, are they offended by something that I'm saying? But I think the ability to read a hitter is the same thing that plays itself out in life. And whether you're with a group of friends or a group of people, you've got to be able to read situations. You've got to be able to read people themselves. And so I think the correlation between the two is just the ability to understand the situation, but also understand the person that you're communicating with. They say you treat everybody equally. That's not necessarily true. I try to motivate everybody the way they want to be motivated and the way I think they'll react best, but it's not always consistent. But if you can't read a person and can't understand what motivates them or what demotivates them, then you have a really hard time as a leader getting the whole organization to do exactly what you do.
Have you found that more difficult the higher you've climbed on the ladder, the more people you've had essentially under your tutelage? I mean, when you're suddenly the numbers multiply out greatly, the ability to get to know them well enough to know what motivates or demotivates them. How are you doing that as you progress?
It can become a little bit more difficult because once you get to a certain level within a company and, some of my experiences in large Fortune 100 companies, everybody's been extremely successful. And so they get to a certain point and believe they're convicted. They have conviction towards the way they believe things should be done. And sometimes if you disagree with it, you got to figure out the right way to be able to communicate what you think they should be doing, what you think they should be doing different, or you've got to plead your case. And, when I approach situations like that, I take pride in believing I'm not the smartest person in the room, so I'm going to listen to other people's opinions. I try not to get too married to opinions that I have, because if somebody in a room can convince me differently, then I'll change my direction or change my decision. So, I think that as you move up through the process, I think you just have to be a little bit more open. You have to be a little bit more cautious with the way you try and change somebody's opinion. And for the most part, you have to be respectful of their decisions if it doesn't work out the way you think it should be done.
Awesome. Last question. You've had this role at ViON leading some of the amazing things the company is doing. We had a chance to chat a little bit about that in California. Is there something happening right now at ViON that you're working on or working toward that has your competitive juices flowing?
Yeah, it really does. We're a company that's 40 years old, and we've been addressing the federal marketplace as well as some of the public sector and a few commercial accounts. And, 3 years ago, we had to go on a trajectory to transform the company and try and move it into more of a cloud service provider type strategy. And we had to make a lot of investments to do that. We had to transform the sales organization and added some new resources to the sales team and some of the support positions we had, but it was a total transformation. And then create this winning culture. It always had a winning culture, but now you're going to go down new revenue flows and emphasize new things to the organization. And the transformation effort's been outstanding. The people, we have a winning culture. We have a winning attitude. We have a lot of people that do all the little things to make a difference. And it's been fun watching this organization over 3 years transform. And we've transformed to where the market is going. And so in the cloud environment, if you're competing against Amazon or Google or Microsoft, that's not an easy task. And I think our organization's done a great job of that. And again, it's because each and every one of the people have made a difference for us. So I'm real proud of this organization and proud of where we're at today.
What I love when I hear you talking about we have a great culture, it's a constant work. You never get there, right?
Right.
With a little inattention, culture can go south pretty quickly. And so
right.
All of that, again, plays into what you learned from Coach back in high school. And I hope maybe the next time I get a chance to talk to you, you'll tell me you've reached out to Coach Tim and I'll get a chance to hear how that conversation went. I'm sure it will be powerful.
That sounds great, Don. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been an honor. I love learning. I love learning from people who are finding great lessons and applying them. And you're a wonderful example of that. Jeff, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Don, thank you very much. I appreciate you as well.
Jeff is the perfect example of how to adapt and embrace change. Preparation is what you do in advance, but adjustments are what you do in the heat of the moment. Like Jeff, my team and I thrive on building routines, but this lesson reminds us to always be on the lookout for those moments when routines threaten to become rules. As a group, we want to make sure that we never allow the way we do something to become the only way we can do something. Thanks for listening to the show. Did you like what you heard? If so, subscribe to the podcast. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday, and you can be the first to listen. Subscribe on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com, or by texting subscribe to 58885, and you will receive a free chapter of one of my best-selling books. While you're there, remember to join the Greatness community. For a free weekly leadership lesson, I write for Forbes.com and information on my live and virtual keynote speeches. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Finally, are you a corporate competitor? If so, tell me the story about a time when your athletic experience taught you a leadership lesson you still use today. Until next week, I appreciate you.